All right, we're at the 10th tip, to quote Dr. Flat, the guy with the most education on this podcast, making the lowest educated comments. So we're at the 10th tip talking about reflection and evaluation. And I'll tell you guys this, this is kind of how, when I first wrote this stuff up and I was presenting it this off season to different groups when they would ask me to speak, that's how this got started. I thought of things that I thought were important to to coaches to know, and came up with 10 tips to help you win football games. And I try to come up with a clever way of saying them. But basically, this is what I said for the 10th tip. Reflection and evaluation are the new, and I quote, strength training and special teams. And here's what I mean by that. Years ago, and I mean years ago, people getting a lift in was like revolutionary. And when I started coaching with Sid Maxwell, we weren't the only team lifted, but Sid was really good at training stuff when a lot of people weren't. And it was an advantage for us. It was an actual edge we had over the other teams. Before that, it was special teams. People who really put an emphasis on their special teams got a real advantage, a real edge over their opponents. Those edges get smaller and smaller every year because everybody does it. 0-10 teams lift weights. 0-10 teams train. So you don't quite have that edge you used to have by just being good in the weight room or good on special teams. So what are some ways you can get an edge now? They're a little harder to quantify. One is who can build confidence in their players, who can utilize the technology, and all these tips we've used. But for this one, I'm going to say the new version of that is who has a system in place to reflect and evaluate. And I'm talking about genuine. And here's where this is the data I'm going to use to support this tip. I'm going to use the Parker Resources podcast data that I try to follow. And it's interesting to me who listens from where. And I mean, people from all 50 states have listened this month, Chad. You know that? People from all 50 states have listened this month to the Parker Resource podcast. Hard to believe. I don't think they're listening.
Why you listen to this?
I think they're listening in spite of you, but they're listening to me and Michael. But nevertheless, they can let us know.
I want to know who listened in Alaska.
Well, maybe they'll at me, okay? And maybe they're not in Alaska. I'm just going off the data that they send us through the company. But with that being said, we can see how many people listen to each episode, right? So if we did a Head Coach Academy, we aired it twice, once in 2020 and once in 2021. Okay. In both cases, it was 10 episodes, much like these 10 tips. And it was a hit. It really was a hit. It was some of our most listened to episodes. You know what came in 10th place both times? The episode about what?
Reflection.
Yep.
Evaluation.
Yep. Both times. So, I mean, you can get tons of people listening to the rest of them, and it would drop off by a big percent, not like a few more of people listen to all of them except that. And I'm going to guess that might be true here too. That, some people aren't going to be as interested in this as they were chart efficiency or how to get their team to play faster, how they work. I'm not saying that one of these tips is more important than the other one. They're all important. But it's interesting to me how many people don't really take into account a plan to reflect and evaluate. They're not interested in hearing us talk about this as much. So the people that are still listening may be getting that special teams advantage or that strength and conditioning advantage from back in the day. That's my theory on this. That one of the things that I thought really helped me was making sure we got data and information back on what was working, what wasn't, and we tried to come up with real plans on how to fix it. So coaches being able to productively evaluate and reflect are the ones that are getting the advantages now. And I think reflection is the last thing coaches really want to talk about. They would talk about offense, defense, special teams, player development, coach development, whatever. they really get to this when they get to it. But here's some things I commented on this, and I'm gonna let you guys go really before I even get to my list. But y'all can attest that I'm not making this up. I used to make y'all fill out a survey or a Google form, or before there was a Google form, a pen and paper, where I'd make them rate everything. And we talk about everything. And there was all these, I had a plan to evaluate, reflect. I had a personal plan, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then I had ways to get the information from you guys who were coaching with me. So I'm not just saying this, we actually did it. But I thought from a lot of those things came some really good ideas, even though Michael especially hated doing it.
Yep.
But it came from some good places. So before we get into my personal list of how I think you should evaluate and reflect, or things that can help you evaluate and reflect, Chad, what do you say about, I guess, everything I've just said?
Well, I think that it's definitely the least sexy of all the topics, for sure. It's not as much
Kind of like the
fun.
Chad Flat of the topics.
Well, I wouldn't go that way necessarily. But it is the least sexy. It's not as much fun. And I will tell you, as I think this is probably one of the skills I'm probably need the most work on myself from a leadership standpoint. Very good with ideas, very good with generating ways to do things, not always great at making sure I saw if it really did as much as it should have done, whatever the idea may have been that we try to work with. And so I think that that's real easy for lots of people. This requires the most discipline of all the things you talked about. Because
Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
That's a good way to put it.
That's truly why it's so hard to do. That's why that I think when you talk about like the great coaches like Coach Saban and those guys, the reason they're so good, I mean, besides all the good players and all that stuff, is they have a different level of self-discipline to do these things. And I don't even think I could fathom what it's like for them.
What's interesting about this is I'm actually good at this. Like, and I'm not as good at ideas. People might not think that follow some of the stuff, but I'm really not that good at ideas. I'm pretty good at taking ideas that other people had and saying, yeah, that, maybe you could also do this, maybe you could do this. And then I'm really good at saying, that ain't worth the damn. Before other people say it ain't worth the damn, I already can see it, and that, we need to change this, we need to change. Kind of the exact opposite of what you just said, Chad. But I do think it has really helped me. Like, as I evaluate my own personal career, one of the things that has really helped me is being decent at this. It comes natural to me to do this. And for someone who has absolutely zero discipline in, what they would consume, whether it be beverages or food, I do have a lot of discipline for this stuff. Like, I really would do the things that we were going to do. I really did follow through everything on what went well, what didn't go well, how we're going to fix it, we're going to do, and I didn't think of it like that until I quit coaching, actually. That was one of the reasons why it wasn't that I had the magic plays or whatever. I really do think this stuff is the new special teams or weight room, or is that metaphor ringing for y'all? Because I hope it is like that. I do think it's like the new thing that if you can get good at it, you'd have an advantage over all those people that don't want to hear us talk about this because they don't care. Right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Michael?
I mean, I think Chad hit the nail on the head. Like, the thing I wrote down was like the reason that people don't do this is because it's hard. It's not fun. It is a lot more fun to sit around a whiteboard and talk about football, but this part will actually is more beneficial to you. And, I think it's human nature to kind of deflect some of this stuff and not want to actually look at what the problems were, especially in yourself. Like, self-reflection is a very hard thing. I think it's easier to say, like, okay, we were bad at this and it was their fault and this is what they need to do better. But it's hard to look at yourself and say, this is what I did poorly and this is what I need to do better. I think, and so that's just one of those things that comes with maturity. And as you get older, I I wouldn't say it becomes easier to do, but you learn how to do it. And so you can be able to see your own flaws and what you need to get better at and work towards improving your team based on that.
No, that's exactly right. I think it is one of those things that you get better at as you get older. It's probably one of the few parts to this series we've had on these tips to win games where age really does matter. You do get better with this as time. But here,
Yeah, it's just maturity. So some
Yeah.
people mature earlier. Chad's still not really that mature. So that's why
Right.
he still struggles.
He's
with it.
making tip jokes over
Yeah.
and over. Um, tip, TIP, by the way, for anybody that didn't, we're still a PG rated podcast. So if someone said, okay, well, I get it, guys, I hear you, I get it. We all suck at evaluating and reflecting. We need to do better. Okay, whatever. How would one go about doing that? This is how I would answer that. So when I was coaching, and I did it through documents and I did it through my own personal notes and whatever. And I didn't care if other people saw them or didn't, but of course, then they turned into stuff that now is what's called Parker Resources. But if we were doing something, let's start with something simple, like we were doing a fundraiser. Okay. This is not even, we'll get to football in a minute. We're doing a fundraiser. I'm going to write down what I think this needs to look like. Okay. I'm making this up because we never did it. We're doing a car wash, right? Whatever. We're doing a bake sale. I don't know. So here's how we're going to do this bake sale. We got a little plan. I make up a little flyer. Here's how the bake sale is going to go. Well, when the bake sale was over, regardless of how it went, I went back to that and I changed stuff for the next time. Does that make sense? Like I said, if I had to do the bake sale, and I guess I could use a real example. We did this thing at Pickens called Meet the Dragons where, we involved everybody, K-12 football, cheerleading, the band, everybody. And it started with this really small idea. And it was like we did something. And I, right after it was over, I went in and said, next year we need to sell pizza. And next year we need to invite the band. And then we invited the bands. Like the next year we need to do this we need to schedule little scrimmages for the little leagues and, get a bouncy house or whatever it was. That's a real story, by the way. The rest of it's made up. But it came off of, this is a key, Chad. You said you need to work on it. I'm going to tell you a key that you can learn from. Don't wait till next year to start figuring out how you're going to do it next year. Meaning, if you said, okay, I've been doing all these end of the year conferences with teachers this week as the principal, and I really wish I'd have scheduled them differently.
Mm-hmm.
You need to write now in wherever notes you have for summative conferences, write how you need to schedule them for next year because you're going to forget.
Right.
And next year it's going to be April and you're going to do the same damn thing that you did this year that you were so frustrated by because you forgot. But if you write now in June 1st, when it's finally done and you kind of can reflect on how them summative conferences went, you can then think about how you should have done them, put it in some kind of form that you can pull back when you're starting to set them up for the next year. Now, that's how I did fundraisers. That's how I did coaches meetings. That's how I did everything. I was going to write it down, like kind of a base plan of what it was supposed to be. And then I was going to go back right after we did it and act like I was doing it next year. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Then I do that now with HR, like new teacher orientation. We got a plan for new teacher orientation. When it's over, I'm going to go back and say, I might should have done this. Because what I found over the years is if most people do new teacher orientation, it amounts to nothing. Something was horrible about it. They say, God, we can't do that next year. And then next year rolls around and they do it again because they damn forgot, whatever it was. So that would be my advice. Now, that's not easy. Like you guys said, that's not easy. And it takes a little discipline. And you don't have to have this crap written out like I do, by the way. If you're pulling up some Parker Resources and I'm like, oh, God almighty, I can barely write. That's just something that worked for me. Okay. You can make some notes on a notepad. You can make a Word document. It's one page. It's just got 5 bullet points. That's 2 words each or something that you understand. But I would still write it down. I would then use reminders. I would make calendars for me and use reminders for me. I put those 2 things together. Then I'm going to let you guys talk about kind of all 3 of those because they go together. Writing it down, using reminders, make a calendar, meaning whatever we said we're going to do. Because I'm going to get into some football stuff in a minute, but I want you guys to hear how this is universal. This doesn't really matter to football, to be honest. You just can use it to help you. If Chad's doing his summative conferences, end of year conferences with teachers right now, and something's not going well, or just the format of it, he doesn't like how he's doing it. He wished he'd have started 2 weeks earlier, or spread them out differently, or included these people, or whatever. He writes all that down. You need to then put that in some kind of format to remind you. Say that Chad thinks, you know what? I really need to do a better job of recognizing these people's birthday. This is not true because Chad actually does do a good job of this. But let's say he didn't. And he, from these summative conferences, he says, you know what? I got to do a better job of reminding these people's birthday. Well, that sounds good in theory because let me tell you, some people will be, well, let me get back to that. That sounds good in theory, but if you don't do it, it was a waste of your reflection and evaluation energy. So there's really 3 stages to being good at this. There's the first stage, which is you suck and you need to get better. Then there's the second stage where you want to get better. You have some good intentions of this needs to be better next year, and we need to do a better job of this, and we need to do a better job of that. But you're not actually doing it because you don't have the discipline or the means or whatever it is to do it. And then there's the third stage, which is you're actually fulfilling what you said you're going to do. So if you said, Chad, I'm going to take the offensive lineman out to eat wings every Monday next year, I think that'll be a good move for us. And I say, yeah, that probably would be a good move, build some camaraderie, whatever. Then it gets to next year and Monday happens and nobody went to wings. It's probably not because you're sorry or you don't care. You just didn't really have a structure to take that conversation from 9 months ago and move it into this reality. So I would actually put it in my phone. You have a phone now. Everybody has so much more things to help them with this stuff than they had 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I will put it in my phone, recognize birthdays every day or check, whatever it is, whatever you said you're going to do, put it in. Have a calendar. So we had a calendar where we're like every day, and I put this stuff on Twitter before and it's taken off because people see it and say, oh, look what all the coach does. But it was just, these are the things that need to happen every day this month. These need to happen at some point this month. You know what I mean? And I would literally scratch through them daily. So writing it down, using reminders, using a calendar for you. I don't mean that calendar you pass out to the mamas or all that. I'm talking about a calendar for you. So before I get on to the other 2 things, let's go around a little bit. What do you say about all that, Chad?
I do think I have, from working with you, I have a calendar, a leadership calendar modeled very much like what we used to have for football. It goes through all 12 months. And because of the school calendar, the beginning of that calendar is always
Right.
June is where it starts for us. So we run like a fiscal year on it and works from there. I'll tell you something that even just listening to us tonight that I want to do is I want to take it because I build mine in Excel and just put it on docs that way because I love the format, the way it sets up in Excel and stuff. And so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I can link the reflections I have done to the events in that calendar. So when I review it for that month, I can just click on it. So in August, we got to do this. I can click on what I noted from last year and look over it.
That's a good idea.
And that way it's all centralized and it just keeps being added in the same place. So it's all hyperlinked to the other docs and stuff. I just thought about that. But the point is, you're right. And we have all this technology and stuff to make all this stuff work easier for us. But far too often we take all that technology and distract ourselves with it with other things. And that goes back to the whole point of what Michael talked about, being mature, about being older. It's all the discipline to do it. And then to follow through with having done it once you've done it. This is a very heavy mental lift too. Like this takes a lot of energy for you to do this. So you have to be very deliberate and intentional when you choose to do this effort too. You know, even though Chris is talking about when he came in from this, he just started saying this or that, we're going to add pizza or that. That stuff is actually, like he said, that's a pretty quick thing you could collaborate and do quickly. But some of this stuff, you know, when you're evaluating your personnel and how to use it best, you really have to spend some time thinking about that. And so you've really got to dedicate time to that. And it probably has to be some, either you work directly with your most trusted person on that specific entity of your team, or you work on your own and then figure out how you're going to present and go from there. But it's hard. Like Michael said, this is difficult.
Yeah. What you got, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you were talking about your kind of three parts of this, like it's, you know, we've talked about this. It's okay to suck less tomorrow. And that's kind of the whole mantra of this thing is that, you know, I think if you get to that step 2 of understanding, like, okay, we got to get better at this stuff. If you're choosing not to do it at that point, then that's on you. That's just laziness. No, how you do it is 100% up to you. I use pretty much everything in my life is in my phone. So I use reminders and notes and all these different things. I have hundreds of reminders, and some of them go off every single day. Some go off once a year. Some go off once a month. Like, you know, you have to figure out what works for you. And so, and it can't be that I don't understand how to do this in any capacity. You're going to have to figure it out. And like I say, if it's write it down and you file it away, that's fine, whatever. If you know something needs to improve in order for your team or business or whatever to get better, and you consciously choose not to do it with the excuse of, well, I don't really know what to do here. Like, you're on your way to getting fired. Like, you're choosing to know that there's a hole, there's something that's got to be fixed, and you're not doing anything about it. So figure out what works for you. Just like there's no magic offense and no magic defense, there's no magic here. You have to figure out what works best for you. And some of the stuff, you know, you'll figure out as you do it, you'll find better ways. Every year, like Chad was just saying, he thought about a different way to do it. You'll find different ways to do it. You'll make it better. But you got to start somewhere. Baby steps. Build something, and every year you just kind of make it better and better and better. And over time, you'll find out that you might have actually created something that's pretty good.
No, that's right. You know, I'd like for us to add in a little football talk since it's been non-football, because I think it's the same thing, by the way. I don't think it, I don't think it, to the three of us, we know when we're saying this, we mean for anything. But I'm saying I would take the kickoff team, okay? And I would write out what I thought the kickoff team should look like. We're going to line up like this. We got these 4 kickoffs. We're going to go sky, right and left, deep right and left, onside, surprise onside, whatever, right? That's our scheme. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's where we're going to put our better players. Here's the description for each position. And here's how we're going to practice it, and blah, 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 right? Then at the end of the season, or maybe even during the season as stuff came up, but I wouldn't just go to it every week and rewrite it. Don't get me wrong. But if something came up, maybe I'd add it during the year. But at the end of the year, I'm going to relook at all that kickoff stuff. Okay? And I'm going to get information from 4 different places. And that's what we're about to talk about. The first place I'm going to get information from is from me. That's where I wrote it down, my reminders, my calendar, all that stuff we just talked about. That was the second thing you're going to get is real data. Meaning, in kickoff team world, we kicked off this many times. The team started on this average field position. You know what I mean? That was good. That was bad. We talked about efficiency a while back. What was the percent of efficiency on kickoff team? That's real data. Because I think something Chad hit on earlier that we hadn't talked about is he was saying that he struggled with seeing what the real results were, like something sounded good or looked good or whatever, but did he really follow through to see? Well, that's where the real data comes. Like, are you really seeing this how you want to see it, or what's a fact? Because you may say our kickoff team sucked, and you remember the one game where you gave up 2 long kick returns. But if you look at 10 games, your kickoff team's efficiency was better than it's been in 10 years. But you thought it sucked because you only remember those 2 bad plays. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe you thought your kickoff team was pretty good and the reality was it sucked. Like, are you looking at the real data or just going off of feelings? The feelings were part one. The feelings really are that first three things. The data has to be the next thing. The third thing would be surveys, input from others formally. And the fourth thing, which we'll talk about these together, but the fourth thing would be informal discussion, maybe one-on-one talks, discussion, data, information from others, but in not that formal survey type setting. So to go over that again for people who can't see it in front of them like me, feelings, real data, surveys, and discussions. Those four things. I'm going to spend most of my time getting my reflection and valuation information from those four sources. Data is pretty simple. I don't think we have to talk about that. Okay, I mean, I could be wrong, but like if we had the bake sale I made up earlier, if we sold some cakes to a rate we expected, that's a good day. If we didn't, we didn't. So pretty simple. Kickoff team, average starting field position, punt, net punt, offense, defense, points, yards, efficiency, whatever you want to measure. But you need some real data. Surveys can be a little tricky. This is the one Michael hated, but we got a lot of it.
I was a little less mature.
He was a little less mature. He wants people to do as he says, not as he did. But the surveys can be as simple as, and I always wanted to have two different things in the survey. I wanted to take every aspect of the program. So something like player development, academics, strength conditioning, mental, the team building activities we did. And then of course, offense, defense, special teams, all that. I wanted the coaches in this case, and I believe the coach surveys are the most important in coaching. You can send some player and parent surveys. You'll get a little bit of stuff from them, but I'm talking mainly about assistant coaches and coaches. And you should do one yourself, by the way, if you're the head coach. Everybody should do it. I made them rank what they thought. I thought this was important. I got to this, by the way. I didn't always use it. I make them rank from 0 to 10. How good are we at this? And then what was good, what was bad. You know what I mean? So instead of me just saying, hey, Chad, tell me what you think we're doing. What do you think of the offense? And for whatever reason, all you wrote was bad stuff. I may think you're kind of down on the offense, or vice versa. If you had nothing to say, I may feel like you think we're doing great. But if you combine the comments with that number, you can get a better feel. So if Chad puts, how good are we on offense relative to other teams? And I would quantify this. Are we in the 90th percentile? That's 9, the 80th percentile, the 70th percent. You see what I'm saying? We're talking about a real scale here, not like a 70s passing. I mean, like, where do we rank? And Chad puts it, we're a 9, and then he complains about a couple offensive things. I know he's not down on the offense. Now, if Chad puts a 4, and he's written all this kind of, I think we did the best we could offensively. I appreciate what y'all did. But he put a 4, that doesn't jive either. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to have to talk about that. Like, if he put a 4 and was negative, or he put a 9 and was very positive, it's about what you think. So the number, I got much better genuine discussion from the coaches when I made them do both. And sometimes it was completely misguided. What was your impression of our relationship with the middle school? A 2. Why? This one time, and it'd be something just completely ridiculous. But that's okay too. But at least you figured out they were disgruntled about this one thing about the middle school team, right? So I like the number plus the explanation. I know people listen to this and talk a lot about football, not this other stuff. So I would, if you want to just do offense, defense, and have all 6 special teams, how good was our punt team? On a scale from 1 to 10, how good was our punt team? We were a 7. Why were we a 7? Blank. You know what I mean? Just something that simple. You get a decent idea. Did the number really matter? Why, hell no, it doesn't matter. If you were averaging a 7.2 or a 6, nobody gives a shit about that. But it does give you an idea of where they put them. And everybody's ranking a little different. So Chad may be a tough ranker. He may put everything's a 6 and one thing's a 7. And then the other one's a 2, where you're like, ooh, that's bad. And somebody else puts a 10 for everything because they're just love where they are, you know. And somebody else puts a 10 for everything except this one thing, they put a 3. Well, that's the only thing they care about that we need to talk about, right? So you can kind of use the numbers to guide some discussions, but don't put a lot of stock into what they actually put for the numbers. I don't know if I'd average them or anything like that. What you guys got to say about that, Chad?
Well, you nailed it. The point of the number is to generate the commentary. That's what you're going for. Because in this stage of the evaluation process, you're looking for anecdotal stuff. You want them to talk. You need qualitative data. You need and what you get out of the numbers, you get perception data from them. That's what you're looking at. And so that's how they perceive it to be. But now you actually want them to provide some commentary, because that's where a lot of times you come up with things you didn't think about. And that's what you're genuinely wanting. If you're trying to get better and you're trying to win and you're trying to do that, you need input from everywhere. Doesn't mean you got to do that. Doesn't mean you don't even know more than that. But it does mean, as the leader, that's your responsibility, is to listen to it and determine, can it help?
No, that's right. What you got, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both of you are saying. I hated filling out the whole Likert scale of this is a 7, this is an 8. I was like, this is so subjective. Like it's
Correct. It is.
I was not a fan of it. I'm not. And it was more to me about what the stuff that you actually wrote. Like, this is what we were good at. This is what we sucked at. This is what we need to do to get better, type stuff. But I think it's depending on which side of the scale you're on. You know, like Chris was looking at it from one perspective of the head coach of the guy that was getting all the information. And I was looking at it from the other perspective of the guy filling it out. But I mean, I see both points. I feel like I think it is important to, you know, if you're actually going to sit down and talk to the people about the data that you collected, then it is a good starting point of this is what you think we suck at. And, you know, let's talk about it, why, and all that stuff. But again, like we're talking about here, this is what worked for you. You know, this is not necessarily what works for everybody, but it is something, it was, I feel like this thing you made us fill out was about 800 pages. It took about 3 days for me to do sometimes. But
That might be an exaggeration.
I don't know. It was long. It was at least 3 full days. I felt like that I had to work on this thing.
You're pretty mentally weak.
I know. And slow
About
moving.
surveys, I am. That's for sure.
But I, you know, Michael said that this isn't for everybody. I agree. This, you don't need to do everything like I did.
Yeah, don't just make a survey because that's what you heard.
But evaluating and reflecting your performance. The problem is, I do think a lot of people hear what Michael just said and say that worked good for them. That's not for me. On evaluating, period. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like it's a fact. You can just disagree with me if you want to disagree. Everyone needs a plan to evaluate and reflect. Now, how one would go about that, what we're talking about now is how I would go about it. And yes, of course, you can do it however you want to do it. But I do think in this one topic, it's like if we said everybody should catch punts, Michael. Me and Michael had it one of the times Chad wasn't here. We had a whole discussion, I think, about catching punts and going for it on 4th down and some of that stuff. And it's like somebody'd say, well, yeah, I mean, that's okay for them. But I mean, we're not even going to have a punt return team. Like, that don't even make no sense. Of course you just don't have to do it our way, but you got to have a damn team.
Right.
So you don't have to do it my way, but you better have a damn evaluation and reflection plan. That'd be about the equivalent of saying we're not going to have a punt return team. So you're going to have this. And because it's intangible. People can get away with not having one. They can't get away with not having a punt return to. So that's why I harp on that is I don't want the very few people that are still listening. I really want them to get something out of this because I do think it's where you can get an edge. So let's say you did all these surveys. You gathered the information, call it data, whatever, but I didn't care what they put for the numbers. It led to a discussion. The last piece is a discussion. So first thing was your personal feelings. Second thing, gathering facts, data, not the 1 to 10 thing data. I mean, like, how good was our offense number wise? Then you take the survey information and data. Then you add in a discussion. And when you have these discussions, two things took place. Either, and both were good. When I would so I'm going to go talk to Chad. Me and Chad are going to sit down and have, I guess, what I'd call our postseason meeting. In my case, a lot of times I make them things a little informal. We were just for real going to sit down and talk about football. It didn't have to be some formal thing but I'm going to ask him about everything on this survey that he turned in that I thought was worth asking. Okay. And two things occur in every one of the meetings. We cleared up some misunderstandings and we actually learned something we can get better next year. Both. Because it never failed at one time. A coach is going to put, how do we do with player discipline? 2. Say, why? Because we didn't throw Johnny off the team. Okay. But when we sit down, you can say, hey, thank you. I wouldn't get offended by that stuff, by the way. I wanted the guys to be honest. I didn't know somebody was so mad we didn't throw Johnny off the team. But I'll sit down and tell them, like, did you know that Johnny's mom had just been in this incident and Johnny's dad was in jail and Johnny's whatever? Did you know all that? Like, I'm just kind of thinking that if we throw Johnny off the team, he got no chance. Whatever little chance he's got was hanging with us. But I mean, I get it. If you think we should have, maybe we should have, but that's why we didn't. I don't mind explaining to you. You know what the coach said back? They really genuinely appreciate the information back. May have changed their perspective on that. May have cleared something up. It was an issue. And then I would say, well, let's take Johnny out. How good did we do with this? Oh, yeah, I thought, Coach, you do great, man. You're great. Except for Johnny. I was happy. Well, we ain't got no problem. We cleared something up. That was one thing that happened. The second thing that happened was we for real got better. Michael, even though Michael talks big on the podcast, probably as much as anyone, Michael's answers really helped us because he would say things like, I've used this one over and over again, because at one point, Michael said something on the survey like, we got to do something with this thing, like the Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is people are doing. Like some of these people are using things other than a web page and it's getting the word out. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And we talk about it. Sometimes Chad's saying, we just kind of suck at this type of blocking. We need to go to, talk to so-and-so. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We know him, and then we go and talk to so-and-so off of that conversation. You know what I'm trying to say? These things happened because we discussed what the reflection and evaluation was. So I defer to you guys on the final words on this because I've talked a lot. What do you got to add to all that, Chad?
Discussion creates investment on your staff members. And when they're invested, even though they all want to win, they have more particular loyalty and allegiance to you as the leader because you have listened to them. Can't be replaced in any way.
Very good. What you got, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I know earlier you talked about that one of these tips may not be more important than any other necessarily, but I think this one is arguably the most important for like long-term success. You're obviously, if you're at a place that's struggling, then you need to evaluate, figure out what you can do to make it better. But once you get to a good place, you can't just rest on your laurels. You have to continue to improve. And so that's what the best coaches do, is that they continue to evaluate even when they're winning 10 games to continue that process so they don't kind of fall off at any point. So I think that this is one, it's probably the hardest one, but it's also probably the most important.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it'll be interesting to see if people prove me wrong
And check your data.
and check my data. And I'm going to say that this is the least listened to of the 10 tips. That the title scares them off most of the time because they don't want to focus on evaluation reflection. But here's the good. That's the bad news for us because we want as many people listening as possible. The good news for you, if you're still listening, is that's your chance to get an edge on all them other assholes that didn't listen. How about that?